Well, hello again and welcome to another episode of the Hyperion Adventures podcast. I'm Tom. As always, I'm with my gorgeous, super smart, best researcher in the world, time travel loving wife and co-host Michelle.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
What is that about?
I don't know. I don't know.
So good to have you with us for whatever this episode is going to be. We are recording it
for time travel.
That would be a lot of fun. Maybe we need to break into one of those sometime.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Jot that down.
By the way, we had a family member dress up as Perry the Platypus for Halloween yesterday. By the way, hope you had a very happy Halloween and safe Halloween. We did have a family member dress up as Perry the Platypus.
Perry the Platypus.
Which is very fitting for our family, I will have to say. But all the kids looked fantastic, so that's kind of cool. So we are recording this episode on Sunday, November 1st, 2020. We've gotten through the Halloween season. Like I said, we hope you had a very safe and fun Halloween as much as it could be for this year. Everything's kind of different, but
different experience.
Yeah, but hopefully you had a great time and it was safe and you enjoyed it as best you could. We're into November. Yes, we're into the holiday season. So let's get those Christmas trees up and those Christmas lights up because it's November 1st after all, right?
That's right. That's right. No haste.
No haste. No haste. We got some brand new Christmas lights that I'll be hanging up sometime in the next week or two for sure for our house. We're excited about that. Thank you for joining us today. In the future, you can find us most everywhere you get podcasts. However, the very best place to find us is on our own website, HyperionAdventuresPodcast.com. And while you're there...
Oh, you can sign up for the newsletter.
I love the dramatic pause. And we'll be back with that right after the break.
You should sign up, right? Yeah. You should sign up for the newsletter. It's awesome.
It is. Well, I'd like to think it's awesome. It's something. But it's just a way to kind of stay more in touch with the Hyperion Adventures podcast world. We put lots of information out there about what's going on, past episodes, current episodes, upcoming episodes. We ask for input from you first out there. The Hyperion Adventures Disney Hall of Fame, which we announced a new classic category for this last week. Disney Dishes blog recipe of the week, which, by the way, I think I actually screwed up the link this week and left the link up for the previous week's one. So I will be also putting up the link that was supposed to be on this week's newsletter. I thought about just sending it out a second one with the link, and I'm like, I already promised I will not clog your inbox. So we'll just wait another week. So the link for the pumpkin chili will be in this week's. If you didn't find it already, I mean, the link takes you to the website. You probably could have found it, but just to make it easier for you, we will include that along with another recipe for this week in the newsletter.
And sometimes we put in little tidbits of news that we might not share on the actual podcast.
Right. And Michelle will sometimes give me something. She's like, oh, we're going to give this as bonus material for those who sign up for the newsletter. So every once in a while we have something like that. And we have a couple other things coming out that if you're a subscriber to the newsletter, you will be the first to find out about. Now, I did mention we do have a new Hyperion Adventures Disney Hall of Fame category for you. So we've announced it for those of you on the newsletter. Now we're going to announce it out here for everybody who listens to the podcast. By the way, before I get to that, our second month in a row where we broke download our records, our single month download record. Thank you so very much. Yeah, people. We appreciate so much that you're coming and enjoying this podcast, and we're getting new listeners all the time, and you're telling your friends, and we really appreciate it so much that you've chosen to make this part of your Disney, fun, your Disney interaction week, and we are completely honored by it. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely honored, and can't believe it, and thank you again, as you said, and we certainly appreciate the feedback. We've gotten some really interesting feedback at times and things that have really helped, I think, us make it a better podcast for everybody.
Yeah, that's all we want to do is make it the best podcast we can that you enjoy listening to week in and week out. Of course, not every topic is going to hit everybody that we do, but we want to try and make it as entertaining as possible. So we hope you're enjoying it, and please hit us up and let us know if you're enjoying it or what topics you'd like us to hit, because we will always want the input, and I'll be passing out all the information on where you can find us in just a second, as we do every week, as you know. So we do have a new category for the Hyperion Adventures Disney Hall of Fame. Again, it's a classic category, one we had last year as well. It's Best animated character. So we did have several animated characters make it in last year, mostly because we went ahead and grandfathered in the entire Sensational Six: Mickey, Minnie, Donald, Daisy, Goofy, and Pluto. Also got the characters that were voted in by you for our ballot last year. They made it into our inaugural Hall of Fame class were Genie from Aladdin and Woody from Toy Story. So all those characters are already in our Disney Hall of Fame. You don't need to worry about voting for them this year. However, we would like some nominations for this current one. Just give us your five-ish favorite, and the ones that get the most nominations will make it onto our final ballot at the end of the year.
Right. We're getting closer and closer to wrapping this up.
Yeah, we only have, after this category, we only have one more category left, and then we start doing our actual ballot. And we'll have, for when you vote on the final ballot, if you want to enter into a giveaway, we will have a prize package that'll go there. I don't know if some of the stuff that we discovered yesterday was going to go on there, but we had an amazing excursion over the last 2 days into our garage to kind of tidy up the garage. Most of what was in the garage is actually garbage, but we did find some stuff. Well, there were some boxes that we haven't opened since we moved into this house.
Right.
What's it been? It's been over 13 years now that we've been in this house that we have not opened up. And Michelle has some amazing Disney artifacts.
I started collecting quite young.
Yeah. Just fantastic stuff. We sat half the time out there just going through it and looking at, wow, look at this and look at that. What was the favorite thing you think you found? Yes, or a couple of favorite things you found yesterday you'd forgotten that you had?
Well, I think one of my favorites that I had that we ran across was the commemorative pass into Euro Disney when the year it opened.
Before it became Disneyland Paris.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a giant ticket. And that was something that I purchased that I remember like, wow, that's so cool. And let's see, for other items, finding the stockholders or shareholders meeting signed, autographed by Michael Eisner.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. When you showed that to me, I was like, wow, that's pretty awesome.
To Michelle.
So, I don't think either of those things will be in our gift basket, but there may be some artifacts that we found in there that, we're like, okay, we can kind of add this in and kind of spice it up a little bit, but we'll have a lot of fun stuff in the gift basket for that end of the year final ballot. Now, let's move on, and we want to connect with you also on social media. So please, if you want to interact with us as far as voting in for our Hyperion Adventures Disney Hall of Fame, if you want to just comment, whatever, on there, or suggest topics, please hit us up on social media. We're very active on social media. We're on Twitter at Hyperion Podcast, Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest at Hyperion Adventures Podcast. We do have a YouTube channel. Hopefully you're watching some of these episodes that we put out on YouTube. Maybe sometime. Now, I know Frank and Jen from Dillo's Diz Theme Park Thursday have been doing a What's in the Attic, kind of what they found in their parents' attic that are all Disney historics. Right. Maybe we'll go down and take the camera down and look at some of the stuff that we've had and do a What's in the Garage from us and kind of climb on to what they're doing, because we got a lot of cool stuff out there. So please check us out on YouTube. If you want to find us, just do a search for Hyperion Adventures Podcast, hit subscribe, and you'll know exactly when we have a brand new video out there. Speaking of that, we had somebody who watched our video from last week, did not get a chance to chime in on their 5 favorite not so scary Disney moments, so they wanted to chime in this week. And this is from Jacqueline from Pixie Dust PhD. She has her own great YouTube channel. She said, this was such a fun topic. Here are some of my not so scaries. 5, that feeling when it's a minute or two before your fast pass booking window opens up. Haha. Right. Yeah, that's especially scary, Jacqueline, especially here on the West Coast when we always have to, can we get up at 4 a.m. to make those fast pass plus minutes? She went on to say, for number 4, everything about the Winnie the Pooh Halloween, which was one of Michelle's favorites. Number 3, the anticipation of the track switch at the top of the broken rail at Expedition Everest. That can be,
yes.
I think, Michelle, I'm surprised almost that you didn't have the anticipation sitting there at the rock and roller coaster,
Right.
because I know that beginning of that will
Yes,
get
that's
you
true.
very
That
scared every time.
countdown.
It's that kind of that same anticipation there that it's like it's scarier than the entire ride
Right.
put together. So number 2, the moment in Toy Story 3 when the gang is in the incinerator. Yeah, I
Right.
think we all went through the first time we watched that, a terrifying
Right.
moment there for
Exactly.
sure. And number 1 was Everything About Chernobog, which is from, of course, Fantasia.
Mm-hmm.
So very cool. She said, super fun show. Thank you, Jacqueline. We really
Yeah.
appreciate your input.
Right.
And you can still chime in. If you have not so scary moments, we'll still be happy to add them in future episodes. Hit us up through our social media or through our Gmail account, Hyperion Adventures Podcast at gmail.com.
Right. We love hearing from people that way.
We do love hearing from people that way. And we also love hearing from people who give us reviews. Reviews help us many ways to have other people find us. They're looking for Disney podcasts. There's an algorithm out there. You get more reviews, you get more ratings, and that helps people find you. And we did get a brand new 5-star review this week. That's
yay.
exciting. Yeah. So this came in. I have listened to quite a few Disney podcasts. While I enjoy many, there are a fairly small number I listen to every week. This is one of them.
Aw.
The show is fun, entertaining, and genuine. Keep up the great work. That is Troy from Disney Assembled, who has his own
Wow.
podcast. Thank you, Troy. That is very
Yes.
kind of
So
you. And
touching.
we're so happy that you've enjoyed what we are putting out there week in and week out.
Yes, thank you so much. That we're really honored to receive that and any of the reviews that we've received so far. But thank you. That's really so sweet. And we really do try to share what we think people will like, what we like, and we love the positivity that we get back. It's just phenomenal to me how great of a community this is.
Yeah, that's been the biggest thing for me, and I know we've mentioned it several times for both of us, that the community that when we started this thing, it was just like, okay, we like to talk Disney. Our family and friends are tired of us talking Disney all the time to them. Why don't we just kind of get together and we'll talk Disney and have a little fun, and we'll see if anybody actually wants to listen. And it's been great. Like I said,
Yeah.
the downloads keep going up. It's fantastic. But more than anything else, we've made so many great friends, so many great connections because of this podcast. The Disney community has been amazing. And thank you again so much.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. So before we get into our main stuff of this week, I wanted to talk a little bit about I think I want to try and get into some Disney Plus stuff week in and week out. And there's a couple things that we actually talked about last week, but we had some weird recording issues that even though we talked about them, I had to edit them out because they're messed up because they started like, like that.
Sounds like when I normally talk with you.
Exactly. That's what Michelle hears from me.
No, I was thinking how I come across. You're so kind.
So anyway, we'll start off with, yes, we talked about this last week, but we're going to talk about it again this week because you didn't hear it. Once Upon a Snowman was the little Frozen Olaf short that came out last week, and we just loved very much. It was so adorable. I think you'd agree.
Adorable was the word I was going to use too. So yeah, it was really cute. I thought it was very creative how they incorporated the original film footage as well into that, and just kind of had more of a focused perspective of Olaf during it, and showed more of his hilarity and his fun spirit.
Right. And I love how they brought in like little glimpses of the various songs that happened during that kind of time period there. We had a little more of Oaken there, which was a lot of fun as well. I just enjoyed it. It was short. It was really, really short. And I thought it was going to go on for longer because there's like a lot of credits at the end. It says 12 minutes. It's really only like 7 or 8, but it really was still cute just the same. And me, hashtag Real Men Love Frozen. I enjoyed the heck out of it. So that's so cool. Another thing that we're watching week in and week out that we're really enjoying is The Right Stuff. Kind of the, it's not real. It's based on a true story, based on the book that came out a long time ago. And then there was also the movie, The Right Stuff, that came out, I think it was really early in the 80s, maybe even late 70s, but I think it was really early in the 80s, about the Mercury astronauts. And we're really enjoying that every single week that comes out as well.
Right. Yeah. I like that it's not identical to the movie. It's giving a little bit more interesting perspective on some of the personalities and relationships of those early astronauts together. I think that's a different perspective than what we've gotten from the movie. And so it makes it a little bit more intriguing of, how some of those interactions really were intricate into the actual program.
For sure. So really cool stuff. I'm totally enjoying The Right Stuff. Every week it comes out. We're usually watching it either the very first night it comes out or the second day. It's really fascinating. Now, let's talk about what we watched a couple of times the first day it came out. Hello, Baby Yoda. I don't know if you can hear him, but he's saying hi to you. You'll be able to see him if you watch this on the YouTube channel. We have, if you may have seen, I posted on social media, we have a new member of the Hyperion Adventures podcast family. It is the child, and there he is. He's doing the magic hand thing right there. And we're so happy to have him as part of our Hyperion Adventures family. But let's talk a little bit about The Mandalorian Season 2, Episode 1. We're not going to give any spoilers just in case you haven't watched it yet. I would imagine most of you have by the time this show comes out. But just in case you haven't, we're not going to give any spoilers away. But I'll just go with Michelle first. What were your impressions of the first episode of Season 2?
I think the child is getting on to this too. I thought it was phenomenal, first of all. Very much, I think actually a little bit more in depth, maybe just because I'm noticing some more details of the real essence of a Western, being brought out, whether you're looking at some of the types of guns that they're, or weaponry that they're using, the way they sometimes communicate when there's a language barrier, just some of the feel of a real true early Western kind of style of the storytelling. And speaking of storytelling, I just think it's phenomenal. Just love the characters. They keep bringing in more characters that are ones that you like. You're like, oh, I hope this person comes in another episode, and being surprised when somebody else does come back. Like, yay, glad that person made it back in another episode. And, so just a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, completely agree with you on the Western aspect. The Mandalorian, even in Season 1, was very much a Western set in the Star Wars universe, a spaghetti Western, pretty much. Also, considered kind of a samurai Western, kind of the Kurosawa type stuff. It was, some of it was more nuanced. Some of it was flat out. You could just tell, yes, that's definitely a Western right now. This episode was Western. I mean, it was like everything, every Western trope you could think of almost was kind of in this episode, but it played off well. That's one of the things I love about The Mandalorian is that it can be this Western, and you can tell it's a Western, but it still feels fully entrenched within the Star Wars universe.
Right.
Like, you're still within Star Wars, even though this is playing out very much like many classic Westerns you've seen. There was lots of wonderful Easter eggs and some fan service in this episode. And but I like that it's not like it's just smacking you in the face all the time with that. They just like to pepper it in there every once in a while, and everybody who knows what some of this stuff is, or just
right,
that,
exactly.
It's just so fun, and I love that about that. And like you mentioned, and right now Favreau and Filoni, they're just telling the best stories in Star Wars, I think, across the universe right now, the Star Wars universe. They are just doing such a fantastic job with this series. It's amazing. I get excited for it. Every single week it comes out. We've already watched it 3 times. This
3
one.
or 4.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it'll be 4 as soon as we get done recording this, because it's been so great. And also, go back and watch Season 1 again. Go back and watch Disney Gallery, The Mandalorian, all great stuff. And I just can't wait for the next episode to see where we go from here.
Right. Would it be a spoiler to say that there is also one little piece that is Sharknado? At least that's what I felt like. Oh, Sharknado.
Yeah. Michelle is a Sharknado fan.
Yes.
And there's one piece that felt a little Sharknado-ish in a funny way, but in a way that made sense in the storyline.
Right.
But not really spoilery. But look out for that.
Yeah, people
see
may
if you had the same impression if
yeah.
you watched Sharknado,
Right.
which is.
And if you haven't, what are you waiting for?
Why aren't you watching this absolutely terrible movie? Awesomely terrible movie. Yes. The first one. The rest of them. The first one, though. Awesomely terrible.
Come on, they even had one, The Fourth Awakens.
Yeah.
Come on, it was a great episode.
Are we going to get into a Sharknado discussion? Look, the first one was funny because they weren't intending it to be as bad as it was, but it was so bad that it was hilariously funny. After that, they knew of what they had, and so they were playing it up a little bit more. So I think that plays into it. But the first one, why are we talking Sharknado? This is Disney Podcast. Let's get back to what we're talking about today. Lots of stuff for this week, including we now know who may be playing the lead role in an intriguing upcoming Marvel Disney Plus series. And it sounds like it's someone who's making the jump from one popular universe to another. We'll talk about who that might be and what's going on with that. And could Disney Cruise be sailing soon?
Who knows?
Maybe. We'll talk a little bit about that. But let's get to our main topic of the week. So yes, this week we're going through a little time traveling again. We've already brought you Disney in the 80s, Disney in the 90s. This week, we're going to bring you Disney in the 2000s. And of course, if we're going to do that, we're going to go with Michelle because, well, look at her. She's wonderful, awesome, all things that are great in the world. But she does wonderful research. She is our Hyperion Adventures historian. So I'm sure she'll have some fascinating facts that may bring up, it'd be a little stroll down memory lane, bring up some memories for you of your time going to Disney parks or watching Disney movies or whatever it may be in the 2000s. So Michelle, please tell us a little bit about Disney in the 2000s.
All right. Well, that was a big build-up. Thank you very much for that kind compliments there. I think maybe it's just I'm channeling my desire to have been like the Disney archivist person like Dave Smith.
If you're hiring Disney, by the way, she's available.
That's right. So one of the finds that we did have over the weekend was this Fantasia 2000 commemorative coin.
Ooh.
For Fantasia 2000, right?
Yeah.
So, and that kind of, to me, was a little bit symbolic because that's really how the new year rang in for the Disney company and actually for us over here with the Rose Bowl Parade. Mm-hmm. It was the kickoff, where they have some dancers and performers at the beginning, and they did a tribute to Fantasia 2000, which was kicking off, obviously, in the new millennium, and actually made for IMAX theater. So that's how they kind of rang in the new year, and it was a great way to introduce that new film. And the rest of that decade continued to have a lot of great films. I mean, just in 2011, well, there's no way I'm going to name all of them. You can always go and find online all of them that came out. But, some of the ones that were memorable for 2000 also were the Tigger movie, which is new. Dinosaur, Remember the Titans.
Oh, yeah.
And The Emperor's New Groove.
Oh, yeah. That's kind of a fan favorite, from a lot of people grew up in that era or right around that age. And a lot of people love The Emperor's New Groove.
Right.
I think it's a cute movie. It's not one of the best, in my opinion. Don't hate me.
Right.
But it still is fun. I enjoy it. I put it on at night, occasionally to watch it. I think it's kind of a funny film.
Right. There's some parts of it that are underrated in terms of hilarity and character, but I'm kind of in line with you on that. I won't go through all of them, but do you have any come to mind for that decade, movies that were really either your favorites or highlights?
Well, I think that era, really Pixar, at least especially at the beginning of it, Pixar. Oh yeah, she's wearing a Pixar shirt here, which you'll be able to see on the YouTube video. Yes. I think Pixar really took off with a lot. Our relationship took off in the early 2000s for one thing. So, but in one of our first really movie date was to go see Monsters Inc. So that one has a soft space in my heart, because we love that movie. But so many, WALL-E and Finding Nemo, and there were just some great Pixar films. Disney films, I think they kind of hit a little speed bump at least in the early 2000s, at least as far as the animated films. They weren't some of my favorites, for the most part. Lilo and Stitch was pretty good. I kind of enjoyed Lilo and Stitch. And later on in the decade, some of the live action, like Enchanted, is from that time period. And I love Enchanted very much. I think that was a film that I really enjoyed.
Right.
What about you?
Well, I agree with you with Pixar, and Pixar is going to come into play in a lot on this conversation of this decade because there was a lot of things surrounding that, not just the actual films, but with some of the leadership of the organization. But I agree with you. They had a lot of great, wonderful hits. I mean, you named a lot of them. Cars was also a wonderful one that came out, and Up came out as well. Some of the other live actions that were pretty cool were the Pirates of the Caribbean series.
Of course. We love that series.
Right.
I remember seeing that. I think I was in Hawaii visiting my son and had some time to kill before I was flying back to the mainland. You weren't with me, and I went and saw that in the theater, and I came back and told you, this movie's fantastic. We weren't expecting really anything for it, an attraction-based movie,
exactly.
Curse of the Black Pearl. And I was like, this is great. We have to go see this movie. You're going to love it, and I took you to it.
Yeah,
And enjoyed it. Yeah.
It was great. Another one that doesn't get a lot of, I think, attention to it, but one that you introduced me to was, and I may not say this correctly, Bridge to Terabithia. Really intriguing kind of film.
Interesting coming of age type movie.
Right.
Yeah, you can actually, I don't know if it's on Disney Plus right now.
Yeah. I can't remember.
I'm not sure. I know I saw it on HBO or something the other day, but I saw it not that long ago again, and I hadn't seen it in years.
Right. And I'd be remiss not to mention the Jonas Brother, the 3D concert experience that came out.
Of course. I'm sure there's a lot of you out there who are totally all wrapped up in that.
Right.
Jonas Brothers were extremely popular during that time period, for sure.
Exactly. So, looking at how to approach this topic, because there's so many different ways you could go about it. I was thinking first that, from our last time we talked about a decade, it was the 90s, which, had been pegged the decade of Disney, and it's when, there was really a lot of returning to some of the roots of the organization and bringing Michael Eisner on, as well as some other leadership in that
the Disney Renaissance period.
Exactly. And so I was trying to think, well, how would you tag the 2000s, and there were three key elements when doing the research on this that I came across, and it really revolved around the board of directors, and one of them was Steve Jobs, 9/11, and something that's called Save Disney campaign. And when I'm looking at that, I thought, you know what? This is a decade of turnaround. Turnaround for the organization. And there's some really interesting, I guess it'd be cruel to say soap opera. But relationship issues.
Some backstage stuff that maybe came a little bit too much to the front of the stage, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That kind of drove some things that were going on. And it was all very intriguing and interesting. And I'm looking forward to sharing with you. But let's start first at looking at things like parks and resorts, the turnaround for some of them, and transformation, business growth, and acquisitions. And then we'll get into some of these other elements here.
Okay.
All right. So first, in looking at parks and resorts, this decade really did have a lot of turnaround, a lot of transformations that we saw. It was the first time in Disney history that they actually opened 2 parks in 1 year. And so that was really early on in the decade, where they opened Disney California Adventure Park, as well as Disney Grand California Resort Hotel.
Yeah, they actually just redid that whole area, the downtown Disney area, the hotels, that whole area was redone at the early part of that decade. Yeah,
it was transformed.
It was transformed. Very good.
But in the same year, Tokyo Disney Sea opened. So that was, and then shortly after that, like the very next year, France opened up the Walt Disney Studio Park also. So the following year, Mission Space opened at Epcot, and Pop Century Resort opened, giving another Walt Disney World resort for people to go to. And one of the biggies in 2005 was the opening of Disneyland Hong Kong.
Yeah, so the Disney's emergence into China.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. There was also the transformation of bringing in Pixar into the parks as well. So we saw the opening of Finding Nemo Submarine Voyage at Disneyland, The Seas with Nemo and Friends at Epcot, Finding Nemo, the musical at Disney's Animal Kingdom.
Getting a theme here.
I know. And Toy Story Mania at Hollywood Studios and Disney's California Adventure Park.
Right.
So, bringing in a lot of that new IP to the theming of some of the things in the parks.
Yeah. For better or for worse, depending on what your viewpoint is on IP in the parks.
Right.
I have no problem with any of those attractions and the IP within them, but some people aren't as big a fans as we are of that.
True. But I think if you look at kids, you see that they do really find that's their connection with the parks. When they're at the parks.
Completely agree. So
business growth and acquisitions, unless there's other things of the parks you want to talk about.
No, I think you covered it very well. I mean, I think that, if you want to look at if you want to look back at some of the opening of Disney California Adventure Park and the studios out at Disneyland Paris, there's some interesting, it's easy for me to say, information there. If you go to the Imagineering story on Disney Plus, you've probably already seen it, but if you want to go back and revisit that, because there was some interesting stuff that went down with those opening of those parks, but they cover it pretty well within the Imagineering story. Really good stuff.
Right. That is very true. So good point, honey. All right. So DVD releases really started to, take hold and really increase. Mainly too because Disney was starting to add some additional information into the DVDs. So not only were people able to share with their kids or re-experience these movies, these classic films, but they got information that they didn't have before. So, it made that marketing for that information really a benefit. And giving an example, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs DVD in 2001 sold more than 1 million units on the first day of release.
Wow.
I know, right?
It's crazy.
Yeah. ABC had a rebirth with some of their popular films in series like Desperate Housewives, Lost, one of your favorites.
I'm a lostie.
Grey's Anatomy. On the Disney Channel, High School Musical aired and, really became a big hit. Hannah Montana.
Well, High School Musical was huge too, but Hannah Montana was really big.
Right. Yeah, totally. Camp Rock, Kim Possible, and one of our faves, Phineas and Ferb.
That's right. Yeah, for sure. All started in late in the decade. Yeah,
that's right. Not to leave out Broadway. The Little Mermaid came out in that decade as well. And D23 was launched in this decade.
The official fan club of Disney. Yeah.
Exactly. And so they actually held their first biannual convention in Anaheim. After years of trying to partner with the Muppets, they finally acquired the Muppets.
Yes. Now, #Save the Muppets.
That's right. And of course, Pixar was purchased, and more details of that in a moment.
Ooh, that was a big move for sure.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think most people are very excited about too at the end of the decade was acquiring Marvel Entertainment. And pulling a quote from Bob Iger, he says, "The treasure trove of over 5,000 characters offers Disney the ability to do what we do best."
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, there's so many Marvel characters, and we're still seeing them evolve and debut as we go on. I have a story later on that I teased already that is to do with a Marvel character that has not been seen on the screen before, and that we're going to be finding out more about. But there's so many characters we haven't even delved into, some more that may get looked into again. Right. It was a really big thing, I mean, again, adding and we're going to talk about Pixar, but adding the Muppets, adding Marvel, and it just, was where we started to move into with Disney as we went forward.
Right. So. I mean, let's face it, they're great storytellers, and having more rich characters to tell those stories is just amazing. And what we talked about earlier with The Mandalorian, I mean, they're continuing to do that to create new stories to focus on some other characters that may have been more minor or in the background, and now bringing their stories to light.
And I mean, if you look at, especially obviously we've heard that Disney is looking to reformat a little bit, put more money into the streaming service, into Disney Plus. If you think about it, what would Disney Plus be if Disney didn't put the money into these things? I mean, this is, long before they ever thought about having a streaming service.
Exactly.
These were putting the pieces in place to be prepared to be able to do that, to have the kind of content that can fill out a full streaming service, adding the Muppets, adding Pixar, adding Marvel. That was the beginning of what you now, whenever you put on Disney Plus, you'll see across your screen was a lot right there.
Exactly. So, all right, you ready to get into some of the juicy stuff?
Let's get into the juicy, dirty, filthy details. Should I have some soap opera music playing in the background?
Right? Maybe so. It's just, we're all human. We all have issues and things that we go through. And, unfortunately, when you're that famous, and you're holding, lead positions in a company like Disney or on the board of directors, you're kind of under the microscope. And, I probably wouldn't ever want to feel as under the microscope as they do or did. And so I, first of all, want to say that I recognize people are human. People are entitled to have their experiences. We all make good decisions. We all make bad decisions. Hopefully we learn from some of our bad decisions. And I think some of that was going on. It's just that what draws people's attention are to some of these other, more focused on, what weren't some of the good things, I guess.
We've talked about, especially nowadays, that's the truth. What is bad out there in the world gets far more showcased than what's good, what's positive in the world. We've talked about it. We wanted to be the positive Disney podcast, and we've tried to stay with that, and will that draw us, not get us quite as many downloads or clicks or possible sponsors, whatever. Yeah, probably, but we don't care. That's what we want to be. So, but
we have to be who we are.
But yeah, we do.
Yeah. So, and sometimes you're doing something for the right thing and it has a consequence regardless. And so the first thing that right out of the gate has to do with that. So technology was really changing
for sure
at that time, and entertainment industry, whether you're talking film or the music industry, was very fear reactionary, because they didn't know what to do with some of the things that were happening with technology. And Eisner, who came from the film industry, really had a strong belief of copyright laws. And, he really had concerns of some of the things that were going on. And he specifically kind of targeted, when he did a presentation to Congress, the concerns of digital privacy. And he specifically named Apple's rip, mix, and burn slogan, feeling like, this is something that's really going to hurt the industry. And he also didn't see the tech companies doing things to protect privacy in spite of that. And so, he was a real proponent of concerns for this. And obviously, Steve Jobs, who was heading Apple, was not really thrilled about being targeted in this way, in a negative light. And so it kind of started an issue with his feelings towards Eisner, or how he feels Eisner didn't respect him. Totally. So that was kind of one of, a little, start to some of the things. And then there was the issue of Pixar, which Steve Jobs was also the CEO of. So
you don't want a rift between the two CEOs if you're trying to come to a deal at that time, right? Yeah.
Right, exactly. So what happened? So Toy Story was a separate deal that was made between Pixar and Disney. And then they came up with a new deal before the decade started that would have a relationship between the two companies to produce 5 pure digital animated films. And that was the arrangement. And, being such a startup company, Pixar was willing to let most of the leverage go to the side of Disney. In fact,
the big name.
Right. And that, that they felt that they were linking onto this organization. They were going to grow from it. But right now they had to let Disney hold more of the marbles, including to have the rights to all the sequels of these 5 films. So keeping that in mind. So they have that deal going into place. And then they have big successes with obviously Toy Story and Bug's Life. And this kind of made Steve Jobs start thinking, this company Pixar is good, and we're putting out really good content, and Disney needs to recognize that. And whether it was real or perceived, his perception was that Disney just felt they were hired hands, that they just didn't give them the recognition of being, a spectacular company. And so that was kind of starting to also gnaw at Steve Jobs. So there's another thing, building on this issue with how he felt about the Disney company and specifically Michael Eisner.
Now, those films came out in the 90s, but they did lead to where we're going in the 2000s, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. So here's where the problem really became pronounced. Toy Story 2, which was originally, it is a sequel, and it was originally planned to go directly to video. And there's a lot of reasons. I'm not going to get into a lot of the details, but it was decided by both companies that this film will go to the big screen. And so because it was so successful, Steve Jobs felt Disney should count this as one of the 5 films that they were going to make. And whether this was a power struggle or just, Eisner trying to just say, well, here's our contract. And our contract says sequels don't count, so we're not going to count this. You still have to still meet the original 5 original films. And that was another thing that really gnawed at Steve Jobs and really impacting his feeling towards Disney and Eisner.
Well, Steve Jobs is such an easygoing guy anyway, right?
Yes.
Nothing ever bothered him. He's just like, oh yeah, let it go. It's all good. Let it go.
I know. No. By now he was really being pretty ticked off at the whole situation, and really feeling like, again, Disney was not recognizing them for what they were producing and just felt like, and from Pixar's perspective, they felt like Disney's just kind of acting like a distribution and marketing campaign for them and not really collaborating with them. That's, again, these are perceptions and people are entitled to perceptions, but that's what was kind of going on. So, anyways, as I mentioned, there just continued to be this riff. And so when it came time to the original deal was done and they were trying to look at negotiating another deal, which might include even Disney purchasing Pixar, Steve Jobs was not going to make this an easy go of it. And he created an offer that even Bob Iger later said would have been fiscally irresponsible if Eisner had accepted that offer. So, Eisner said no to it. He made counter offers that were continually, refused by Steve Jobs. And this fight just started to become more and more prevalent in the media, more importantly, with the board of directors of Disney. And it started, shining some doubt on Eisner being a negotiator anymore. Is he, losing that ability to really be able to do that, not just with Pixar, but concerns for the future. So, make sense?
That totally makes sense. I can see where that would be an issue, especially, when, Pixar right at that point was, honestly, they were putting out better movies than Disney was, animated wise anyway, at that moment in time. And so it's like, why wouldn't Pixar feel stronger about what their placement is within the company, and want to have more reins over this? And, and Disney would, of course, want them around, but, it's always been Disney is the big boy on the block, they want to make sure and have their, they feel like they should be in that role as the chief. So it had to be a tough position to be in.
Yeah, definitely. Again, like you mentioned, these 2 very, strong, everybody has egos, individuals, feeling like each other's bullying each other. And, like you're saying, Pixar.
Eisner and Jobs and egos.
I know, right? You can understand. Oh, sorry. Baby Yoda. You can kind of understand too from a Disney perspective that they had the rights to the sequels. So they could also create great stories with those characters that were already produced by Pixar, And so you could argue on both sides.
Yeah, you could see both
really
sides
could.
of it. You could, for sure. There's no question about that.
So, but now throw in another episode in history.
Ooh.
9/11.
Oh,
big
major episode.
Yeah, major episode, turns everything up on its heels. Talk about the issue of safety, kind of what we're all experiencing now. What's the issue of safety and going into a park and feeling safe? And that's one of the things we've talked about, even when we've had issues related to the parks reopening. What does Disney do to make sure people feel safe going to their parks? And obviously with 9/11, that was a big concern. Is one of the Disney parks going to be a target, for terrorism? So, there was that.
And just in general, I mean, the travel industry took a hit during that time significantly.
Exactly.
The airlines, the cruise ships, everything, they all took hits. The hotel industry, no one felt completely safe. Just kind of, it's very similar in a completely different way to what we're seeing now in regards,
Exactly. So, and I'm not going to go into a lot of details about 9/11 and everything that happened. You've mentioned some of the things already too, but what it did was it really impacted the stock market, and especially for Disney. And Eisner really started to feel the weight of all these things coming about and concerned, and talk about transformation. His demeanor starts becoming more and more pessimistic, and making decisions more fear-based versus future looking kind of way. And so then you throw on top of it Roy Disney. And again, this is like a story in of itself. It's kind of very much like when we saw Waking Sleeping Beauty.
Right.
It's all these personalities and issues, and and even though Roy Disney is the one that brought Eisner in, was really instrumental in bringing Eisner in, he started really doubting Eisner's devotion to the organization as he saw the Disney, traditions.
Now, this is Roy E. Disney, right? The nephew.
The nephew.
Walt's nephew, right.
Right. And, he just felt, his role in everything was to keep that Disney tradition alive. And he felt some of the acquisitions that Eisner had been making, was bringing non-Disney folk into the mix and questioning, and even some of the things that, the organizations that they brought in, not that they were bad, but just not what he felt was pure Disney. And so now you start having somebody on the board that's really vocal and having some issues and conflicts or issues with decision making with Eisner. So as you see, there's all these rifts coming about in this decade.
Yeah.
And so it really started to be a problem. So it got to be a point where Roy, he and a fellow board member, Stanley Gold, decide that they're going to openly question Eisner and their concerns about him. And it really just, they were relentless at bringing this up. And, not just at board meetings, but openly discussing their disdain for Michael Eisner and where he was taking the company. And it really hit a breaking point for Eisner. And so one of the things which he does is with contracts is he's going to say, what's the letter of the law? And he found a clause in the board of directors that had never been utilized, which was mandatory retirement from the board at age 72.
Oh, my goodness.
So he saw this as a way to get Roy out of the picture.
Wow.
I know, right? So, and instead of him actually going to Roy and talking to him about this, he got the chairman of the nomination committee to be the one to give the information to Roy. And so that individual had to tell Roy that you're not going to be up for re-election onto the board, and at the next shareholder meeting, you will be retired.
Wow.
I know.
That's some dirty laundry right there.
I know, right? So obviously that's not going to make Roy very
Really?
happy.
Oh, good. I can go lay on the beach. I can go relax.
Exactly. Here's the person who's thinking he's the one and only Disney left to really hold the torch, and now he's being ousted by his own company. Yeah, not going to make
the
him
person
happy.
he helped bring in, by the way. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So obviously you're going to think that's not going to go well.
That's not going to fly. Right.
So Roy and Stanley decide to write a letter blasting Michael Eisner, and they had it slipped under the door at his apartment.
What's that?
I know.
You just got a letter.
We just got a letter. I know, right? I know. I mean, it's really incredible. So, some of the shenanigans that were going on. So, the two former board members actually resigned, and they launched a Save Disney campaign. And they were really going all out to promote public pressure to oust Michael Eisner, and so this was, again, we thought it was going on when Roy was part of the board, and once he was off the board, he was
more vocal.
Yes, more vocal, and really, putting the board of directors actually in a position of how do we respond to this, because this Save Disney is not the board of directors.
But it's coming with a guy with Disney in his name.
Exactly. Right. So, then on top of that, Comcast, which was really big at the time, decide that they're going to do a hostile bid to take over and purchase Disney.
Wow.
And interestingly, because now we know of Disney Plus, their thought was, hey, there's a ton of content. And we're the biggest cable company.
Yeah.
If we buy Disney, we can have this to put out on cable.
Right.
So interesting how they had that foresight, but it didn't go through. There's a lot of things obviously it didn't go through. But again, here's more bad publicity, more things going that the board is having to deal with. I mean, can you believe all this stuff?
No. Can you imagine if there was social media during that time, how crazy it would be? If any little news, anything little happens, even whether it's true or not, it pops up on social media and everybody goes crazy. Could you imagine if all this stuff was happening in social media? We're out there as well.
I know. So, when the next shareholder meeting comes up, obviously, the board has to address some of the things going on in the media, and they're trying to shine light on where the company is going, some great things happening, but instead they're dealing with the drama of what's unfolding out there. And so
that's some drama too, some serious drama.
And so actually there was a 43% no confidence vote of Michael Eisner.
Wow.
I know. And in fact, they said that they gave in raw numbers versus percentage to try to make it not sound so bad, but obviously it really is bad. So
it's a lot of shareholders for 43%. That's a lot.
Right. So, we think those things only happen in Star Wars.
No confidence.
No confidence vote. So so Michael Eisner knew, he saw the writing on the wall. So he sends a letter to the board in 2004, and he says, he's not going to renew his contract in 2006. He's going to step down. And the board had already named a new chairman. They still let Eisner be CEO, but they named a new chairman of the board instead of Michael Eisner. So now that's happening. Here's Michael Eisner, who's COO, second in command. And obviously, you would think he'd want the job, which he did.
You're talking about Bob Iger.
Bob Iger.
Right.
What did I say?
I think you said Michael Eisner.
I'm sorry.
Maybe you didn't. Maybe I didn't. I'll check it.
Maybe. Take two. Okay. Bob Iger, number 2, CEO. COO is there. And so he goes to the board of directors because he's a smart dude. And he says, look, Michael Eisner is now a lame duck. And if you want me not to also be a lame duck, you need to publicly announce that, 1, I'm a contender for this, and 2, that you have confidence that you're going to allow me to do some some things for this company and not just stay around and wait for you to find a replacement.
Yeah, not just be sitting there, just filling a seat essentially, right?
Exactly. And so, he had some people on the board who was very favorable to him, some that weren't, and there was, some in the middle, and so, but they did understand why he was making that announcement. So, they really did throw in support, and they actually mentioned that he was the only internal candidate that they were considering. And in 2005, they actually did decide, after a long set of interviews, et cetera, that they would make him CEO of the company. So,
and the company was much better for it.
Right.
At least that's our opinion on it. I know there's
Sure.
some people that weren't crazy about Bob Iger being in that role, but I think the majority of people, and definitely us, think that was exactly a brilliant move and the right move.
Exactly. It had to be very tough. I mean, it was somebody who had been associated with the leadership that was already being under attack. And even though he wasn't Eisner, he was still part of that team, and he was, walking a tightrope there of, you don't want to just bash the other person completely, and that doesn't help. So, he really did use a lot of great resources to figure out how to really self-market, to get into that position. And so he was successful. And very shortly after that, he was able to mend relationships with Steve Jobs and secure a deal to actually purchase Pixar, and was successful in that.
He had a much better relationship with Steve Jobs than Michael Eisner, right?
Oh, so, definitely. And they actually, their friendship really grew, especially getting closer to Steve Jobs passing away. There was a lot of camaraderie. They were meeting together frequently as friends as well as colleagues. So, it was really, to me, this whole decade was kind of like, and
it was tumultuous. It started off in a tumultuous way, and it continued on through much of it.
Exactly.
Right?
And so, sounding maybe poetic or corny, it's kind of like the phoenix out of the ashes. The company came out through stronger. And like I said, at the end of the decade, they purchased Marvel. They started getting things in the work for Lucasfilm. So
secured Pixar back with them, and actually bought out Pixar. So now they were a Disney company.
And just to give you some perspective of the Pixar deal, Pixar was more expensive than either Lucas or Marvel to purchase. And so there you go. So that was the decade of the turnaround for the Disney company.
Wow. That's some really great information there. I mean, really some stuff that I'm sure many of you didn't know that was going on. So much interesting backstage deals and stuff that was happening, and some of this was out there, and I know we've seen a little bit of this in like the Imagineering story and some other things. I think you got some of that information off of Bob Iger's book that came out last year, but that's really fascinating stuff. Really cool. So, just get on a lighter note here. I mean, that was great information. I knew none of that, or not none of it, but very little of that. So that's fascinating to find out what was going on during that time. What was your kind of what do you think of Disney in the 2000s? I know you talked about me with the movies and talked a little bit about what you like in the movies, but like the parks and whatever. I think I was kind of in a period in the early 2000s until I met you, and I started my Disney love started reemerging again because you love Disney so much that I didn't get a lot of that stuff. I still saw the movies occasionally, but I wasn't fully engulfed in Disney. But you still were. So what were your kind of impressions of Disney in the early 2000s, especially?
There were some things that I found intriguing. I think the whole Touchstone and some of the movies that were coming out from Touchstone
started in the 90s, but moved much more into the 2000s.
Exactly. Yeah. And, taking more and more risk doing R-rated movies and things like that. I thought, I wondered if it was going to be a detriment, but I thought Disney also did a great job of, they really didn't highlight Touchstone as one. I mean, my brother said this once. It's Disney wants you to know Touchstone is theirs, but they don't want you to know that Touchstone is part of them. And it's kind of like, it's potentially giving you really great content still, but it is a deviation from, maybe what might be considered pure Disney
Right. It's
style.
not, you don't look at some of these movies, you think Disney movie.
Right.
You don't shout Disney movie.
Right, exactly. For me too, I think a lot of the love of Disney had to do with the parks, and it was exciting to see, things happening. You heard before this decade things were in the works, but actually seeing them come to fruition was really exciting and fun, and knowing that, hey, there's other things to continue to want to have an opportunity to experience, whether you're talking, Disney Sea or Hong Kong Disneyland, we got to see California Adventure Park from the beginning and saw it evolve to.
Yeah, I remember I was working at my first radio station that I worked at the time, and most radio stations have some sort of advertising tie-in kind of with Disney, especially in Southern California, Disneyland. And so I was there with my program director, and he was talking about, he saw this stuff that was all the things that they are planning to do at Disneyland. This is in the mid-late 90s. And I was like, wow, that looks really great. And then when it actually came about in the early 2000s, it was really cool. I mean, California Adventure was not what people were hoping for when it opened up. It's not. You can go to the Imagineering story and hear all about it. They cut some corners. It wasn't, but still, it was another park in California.
Right.
It was more that you could do, and it made it a full-fledged resort in California.
Exactly.
That's kind of cool. So,
Yeah. And eventually, they added rooms that were part of the Disney Vacation Club. So, I mean, it was, really great start to a lot of fun things.
Yeah. What were you like? What was your favorite kind of attraction in the Disney parks in the early 2000s that maybe came around or was just one of those things you really loved?
Well, I think Toy Story Mania was just a blast, and
still is.
It still is fun. Yeah. And I think that was really great seeing it. It was interesting. I remember thinking even, with that, gee, why isn't Pixar coming out more and more in the parks? And I was glad to see that started happening more and more, because I again felt that was such a had great characters and a lot of fun associated, and why not have that? And I think especially at Disneyland, they really embraced that.
Yeah. And like I said, in the 2000s, especially at the beginning of the 2000s, Pixar was putting out the far better films.
Right.
There was no question about it. I mean, there's a lot of people who love a lot of these early 2000s Disney movies. They grew up with them. They, that was their thing. But if you really look at it, as far as with how critical acclaim and, the characters and everything else, Pixar was making the more lasting films in the 2000s.
Right.
And so it was good to see them starting to make appearances in the parks, and to, and Disney to fully, being able to fully embrace them, but also then, doing so.
Right. Interestingly, Pixar their focus was quality over quantity. And I think that's why, Disney was churning out a lot of movies where Pixar might only do one in that same time span. So I think that's why we did see these really great movies.
Yeah, agreed. They were great. So great stuff. Michelle's research, always the best research. So good stuff. I did throw out there on the newsletter and a little bit on social media today, to ask for some listener input on what your favorite moments were of the 2000s. And we did get a couple responses. Doug Stevenson, who is a subscriber to the newsletter, he hit us up with an email. He said, "Hi, Tom and Michelle. Very excited for this topic. Adolescent phase of my life during this decade, so it's definitely full of nostalgia. When DCA opened in 2001, I cannot ever forget how bare bones the park was, as we were just talking about. Still love Soarin', and my beloved California Screamin', rest in peace, was still there. Pixar Pier is fine, but just doesn't have the original charm to me as Paradise Pier had. Everybody has their own feeling on some of these things, right? The gaudy, obnoxious, touristy decor and sometimes make me miss it, but the Buena Vista Street area is absolutely gorgeous and a perfect addition to the entrance of the park nowadays. Superstar Limo, look it up, kids. He said, arguably one of the worst attractions ever to grace a Disney park, in my opinion. There's some people who loved it. They loved, Superstar Limo. It was just a weird thing to me. In 2007, he went on to say, I went for my grad night celebration with my class and hundreds others. To this day, I'm still trying to get Justin Timberlake's Summer Love out of my mind. They kept playing a loop, maybe 20 songs. You get the picture. A very fun experience of to spend time with your classmates at the happiest place on earth. And finally, my wife Sarah and I spent our honeymoon at the Disneyland Resort in January of 2009. We had the, quote, Disney bug, end quote, as Trent says from Disney DNA
Yes.
podcast. Yes, he's known for saying that for sure. So he says you can pick and choose any you want to share. I shared them all. I know this is a lot. Thanks for, as always, guys. I have a great weekend. Happy Halloween and also Merry Christmas, November 1st.
Yay.
So, thank you, Doug. I appreciate always your input on the shows. We also got hit up on Twitter by Cam Ray. You can find him at Cam Ray. He said, we went to Hollywood Studios the last year they had the Christmas lights. They had to tear up the streets down to build the Galaxy's, that was in the studio backlog tour, to build Galaxy's Edge. So he's not too upset about that. He said it was magical. Yeah, he's talking about the Osborne family lights that were fan favorite for many years into the 2010s, but started with him. I may have started right in the late 90s, but definitely through the 2000s. So very cool stuff.
Yeah.
So, and if you have some more memories of the 2000s, please hit us up through our social media or through our Gmail account, and we'll be happy to share them on a future show.
Most definitely.
Once again, Michelle, thank you for taking us on another time-traveling trip, a journey down memory lane of the 2000s. What a tumultuous decade that was for Disney, for sure. But a lot of great things have come from it, the Disney that we know today.
Yes.
A lot of the roots for it, like you said, the turnaround happened during that time period.
Right, exactly.
So very cool. Let's get quickly to the Disney stories of the week. I only have a couple for you this week. I'm going to start with, we may now know who will be playing the lead role in an intriguing upcoming Marvel Disney Plus series. And it sounds like it's someone who is making the jump from one popular universe to another.
Really do tell.
Yeah, this from Deadline.com. With his time in the Star Wars franchise coming to an end, Oscar Isaac, a.k.a. Poe Dameron, set his sights on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Deadline is hearing he is in negotiations to star as the title character in Moon Knight, the Marvel and Disney Plus series based on the comic book hero. Jeremy Slater, who developed and wrote Netflix's series adaptation of the Umbrella Academy comic books, has been tapped to develop and lead the writing team of the series for the streamer. Moon Knight, a.k.a. Mark Spector, is a mercenary who has numerous alter egos, cabbie Jake Lockley and millionaire playboy Stephen Grant, in order to better fight the criminal underworld. But later he was established as being a conduit for the Egyptian moon god, I don't know if I'm going to get this right, Khonshu. Wow. Most recently, the character was a consultant who dresses in all white and goes by the name of Mr. Knight. So that's kind of cool that if this is true, if this does follow suit, and Deadline's been pretty accurate on this stuff so far, that Oscar Isaac is going to be part of the Marvel universe.
Very cool. Well, he also knows Jon Favreau, who's,
part of the Iron Man, and also is a character within the Marvel universe himself.
And Star Wars.
Yeah, very good.
Very cool.
So very cool.
All one big happy family.
Yeah. So the story went on to say Marvel and Disney Plus has been ramping up their development slate as Isaac joins Tatiana Maslany, who we talked about, who was recently tapped to play She-Hulk, and Iman Vellani, who was named the new Miss Marvel. And WandaVision, of course, should be debuting sometime here within the next couple months. So that's exciting as well. So really cool. I think, and we're going to talk a little bit about this. Actually, we're going to probably talk a lot about this next week. This upcoming year on Disney Plus could be the year of Marvel. There is a lot of stuff coming up the chute for sure. So, or down the chute, I guess. Is that down the chute? Down the chute. Up the chute? Down the chute? Whatever. Either way.
In the chute.
In the chute. Open the chute. Whatever it could be. Let's move on. Could Disney Cruise Line be sailing again soon? Well, there was no definitive news on that, but there were steps made this week toward that end.
Yeah.
This from the Disney Cruise Line blog. On October 30th, the day before the no-sail order was set to expire, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, issued a framework for conditional sailing order for cruise ships, which means an end to the no-sail order.
Yay.
Yeah. This order will allow a phased approach to resuming cruise ship passenger operations in U.S. waters, opening up a pathway to resume cruising operations.
That's exciting.
Now, this may sound a little dry because this is from the actual CDC report here. So it says, the order shall remain in effect until the earliest of the expiration of the Secretary of Health and Human Services declaration that COVID-19 constitutes a public health emergency. I'm not even going to talk about the rest of this. They said basically that this is, the no-sail order is done right now, but there are steps that have to be made to make this go forward. So here are some of the steps that they talked about. So the initial phases will consist of testing and additional safeguards for crew members. Of course, they want to make sure crew members are safe first. The CDC will ensure cruise ship operators have adequate health and safety precautions for crew members, while these cruise ship operators build the laboratory capacity needed to test future passengers.
Wow.
So testing sounds like this will be a big part of what's going to go forward with the cruise ship happening. Subsequent phases will include simulated voyages to test cruise ship operators' ability to mitigate COVID-19 risk, certification for ships that meet specific requirements, and a phased return to cruise ship passenger voyages in a manner that mitigates COVID-19 risk among passengers, crew members, and U.S. communities. So basically what they're saying is that we've gotten rid of the no-sail order, but there are still some steps that the cruise ships need to prove to do that they can before they're completely cleared to do these cruises. And it sounds like what it's going to start is first the CDC has to clear these ships and say you have all the right things in place, that all the crew, the cast members or whatever on Disney cruises and the other cruise lines are safe on there. And when you welcome aboard guests, that it'll be okay for them to be able to get them tested and make sure they're clear. And then they're going to test it out with some little small cruises, it sounds like, with some either volunteers or some cast members sailing as like cruise ship guests aboard to prove that, yes, okay, we can do this without it being a widespread, it's not going to we're not going to have a super spreader event on one of these ships. And then once they do that, they'll be able to do a few more things. It's going to be, like they said, a phased reopening, but at least it's a first step in the right direction. Right.
That is exciting, as I mentioned. And, it is great that, a lot of care is being made to ensure everybody's safety. And, that's really key. And, glad to hear that we're making progress.
Right. So I wouldn't expect if you're, still have a sailing that hasn't been canceled yet in December, January, maybe even February, whatever, that you can definitely say, okay, let's start packing our bags. We're ready to go. Because there still are a lot of hoops that they need to jump through. But again, it's a step in the right direction. Keep monitoring it. If we hear more news on what's going on, we will let you know.
Right. And I would think too that, Disney and other cruise lines have already been preparing a lot of this. They probably, have been aware of what kind of regulations that they have to demonstrate that they comply with. And so maybe that first part may go quickly because they're ready for. And then it's just how do they actually get everything else in place to get it, actually to do the testing sales.
And I think a lot of this will also depend on ports that they're sailing to and ports that they're sailing out of. Like, we know that a lot of the California restrictions are much more in place than, say, Florida, for example. So, Florida may be more likely to get some things going early on. California, maybe a little later. We'll see how it goes. But again, just good news that they're making the right steps towards possibly this happening. And we have 2 cruises booked now, one in May, and we just booked a brand new one coming up for December, a very maritime sailing. So we're really excited about hopefully making both of those, but definitely that one in December for sure.
December of 2021.
2021. Yeah, not this year. Not this year. No, we're not doing the one this year. So, but 2021.
We've already done one this year.
That's true. Boy, did we. Boy, did we. So that's it for the Disney stories of the week. Oh, Michelle has a Disney story. That's how excited Michelle always has the best Disney stories. So.
Well, my Disney story relates to if any of you are ever interested in Rise of the Resistance. I don't know. Maybe some of you might.
Yeah, I've heard it's okay.
Yeah, right. But they have a new virtual queue process that they're implementing. I can't remember now if it's November 3rd or 4th. I'm sorry. This week, yeah. Sorry. But, now as long as you have a Disney Pass reservation for that park, for Hollywood Studios Park, you can try to get into the queue at 7 a.m. You don't have to be in the park to make that attempt to make a reservation. So whereas right now and up until this changeover, you need to be in the park and you can
have actually scanned in.
Right, scanned in and either, at 10 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon, make that attempt. So now you can, from the comfort of your hotel or home, as long as you have that park reservation. As long as you're up at 7 a.m.
Yes.
As long as you have that park reservation, you can make your attempt to get in the virtual queue.
Very cool. So that's good. That's good. Hopefully this, I know that people have a panic attack trying to get that boarding group. So hopefully this will mitigate it a little bit until they can kind of figure it out better and, have it all planned out as best as possible.
Right.
So,
I mean, it's nice that they're trying different options.
Yeah.
And so.
Keep trying until you get it right.
Right.
Until we can, as we all know, there's never going to be something that makes everybody happy. But if we can at least kind of get into that direction as best we possibly can, that would be a good thing.
Right, exactly.
So Michelle's stories, always the best stories. Speaking of the best from Michelle, she gives the best research, she has the best lists. And of course, we know that she has the best tips. So let's get right to it. Here is Michelle's tip of the week.
Well, thank you very much. And I have several that I was thinking of, but I'm going to keep mine brief because I've talked a lot already on this podcast episode.
It makes you still have a voice.
But kind of going in line with the Disney Cruise Line. And so what you may not know is you can actually go on the Disney Cruise website and temporarily book without a deposit a reservation on the Disney Cruise. You can go through the whole process of even selecting which cabin and putting a temporary hold and until but you have to make a quick decision. I think it's usually between 24 and 48 hours in general is what.
It'll tell you when you
right.
It's until midnight of a certain date.
Yeah. And I don't know what, we've had different.
Or 11:59.
Right. We've had different dates that it's given, so I'm not sure what generates the duration of that hold. But hey, we don't see that with other cruise lines. It's if you're looking at another cruise line and you're not quite sure, if you really want to secure a specific cabin, you have to make that deposit. And so this is nice that if you're like us or like me, that like you're up late at night and you're just playing around on Disney Cruise Line and you see, wow, I never thought about this, but what about this one? But I can't make that decision without talking to my sweetheart, so let me just put a free temporary hold on that, and so you can do it.
Yeah, I wake up in the morning sometimes and there'll be like 3 cruise reservations. I mean, they're just holds, but it's just kind of funny. Like, okay, now we need to talk about this and decide which one is best, or if any of them are good. But we did book that very Maritime cruise just recently. So that's pretty cool.
So that's my tip.
Very good. Michelle's tip, always the best tip. My tip is that, and this is something I actually kind of got from our good friends Rob and Kim LeBerry, who actually are in Walt Disney World area as we speak. I know, we're so jealous right now, but they were doing talking about, they just did an episode where they compared the Oogie Boogie Bash and the Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween party.
Episode.
Yeah, it was a great episode. But Rob made a good point of making sure that that you need to know if you're planning on going these things, that you need to know dates when to book them, because some of these things will sell out.
True.
And if you really want to go to them, you don't want to wait too long to get them, because you don't want to be shut out if that's something you've really been looking forward to, is going to one of these things. So I'm going to go through some of the dates that when things are normal, assuming that things will eventually return and these dates will be as they normally were beforehand. When do you make these reservations? Now, right now, if you're looking to make a reservation at the Walt Disney World Resort, you need to make those park pass reservations as soon as you know the dates you might want to go and you have tickets, or if you have an annual pass or whatever, a resort stay. go ahead and make those. Those are available. I was looking this morning for a year, plus. So you can go ahead and start making those now. But dining reservations can need to be made starting 60 days out.
Right.
So if there's a special, especially some of these won't be an issue, but there's several of them that you want to jump on immediately when you get the chance to. Now, when things return to normal, there are several key dates that you'll need to know if you're going to the Walt Disney World Resort. Many of you may know this, but if you don't, this is good information for you if you haven't visited the Walt Disney World Resort. Starting with 180 days out, you can make your dining reservations then if you're staying on site. Now that is, if you're staying on site, you can make it for the entire length of your stay. So you can 180 days out, you can make reservations for a week, 2 weeks, whatever.
Right.
You can make them all at that point. If you are off-site, if you're staying off-site, you can make your dining reservations 180 days out, but they have to be a day at a time. So 180 days from the first day, 180 days from the second day, essentially, and go on. You can also do your add-ons at that point. If you're going to the Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique, the Pirates League, like things like the dessert parties, for some of the nighttime spectaculars when those returned. Those are important dates to know. At 60 days, this is when Fast Pass return, assuming the Fast Pass Plus returns. That is when you'll want to start making your Fast Pass reservations at that point. If you're staying on site, you can start making them 60 days out, starting at 7 a.m. Eastern time, 4 a.m. Pacific time, as we well know here. Annual pass holders, you can make those for 1 week at a time, whether you're staying on site or not.
Cool.
If you are staying on site, you can make them for your entire vacation during that time. You can also begin your check-in for your Disney resort at 60 days out. If you're staying off-site, 30 days is your time when you can start making your Fast Pass Plus reservations. Now, that's pretty much the key dates for Walt Disney World. At Disneyland, everything is 60 days.
Right.
Seasonal events, tickets, which are really important because they sell out quickly. Because remember, there's a lot of people in the area, a lot of locals who will buy up a lot of those seasonal events or one-night specialty events like Throwback Night, Marvel Night, Star Wars Night, whatever. You'll want to jump on that early. Also, dining reservations are 60 days out. Now, also Disney Cruise Line has these as well. You need to know the dates for Disney Cruise Lines, and they start on various depending on how many cruises you've done or what your level is within the Castaway Club. Castaway Club, if you're a member. And these include dining reservations for Paolo and Remy, tasting seminars, wine, champagne, mixology, etc., shore excursions, spa treatments, special character meet and greets, Castaway Key cabanas, if you're lucky enough to try and can afford to get one of those. You can start doing that if you're either staying at the concierge level or if you're a Platinum Castaway Club member at 120 days out, and that starts at midnight Eastern time on the U.S. If you're a Gold Castaway Club member, you can start booking those 105 days out. Silver Castaway Club members can book those 90 days before you sail. And if you're a new cruiser, you've never sailed with Disney Cruise Line before, you can start booking those at 75 days out. You will want to jump on those at your earliest possible convenience. Right. You may still not be able to, especially if you've never sold before, or some of the silvers, some of these reservations may already be gone, but you want to try and jump on that at the earliest possible chance you have.
Right. And if you don't get something, it's always good to check with guest services on the Disney cruise that sometimes people do cancel some things and you might be able to get into something. Sometimes they save a few things back for people who aren't able to make advance reservations for some of the other issues. So those are options too.
Yep. So yeah, definitely check back because a lot of times reservations for Paolo or Remy or tasting seminars or whatever will open up when you're on board, but try and jump on them as early as possible if you can.
Exactly.
So that's it for this week. Next week, we're quickly approaching Disney Plus's first birthday. Happy birthday, Disney Plus. So we're going to celebrate by looking back at some of our favorite moments in shows and movies and things that have happened from the first year of Disney Plus, and then look forward a little bit to what we're excited about in year 2. And we'll, of course, be looking for your input on that as well.
Yeah, that's going to be exciting and fun to do.
Should be a lot of fun. So we appreciate that you joined us today. In the future, you can find us most everywhere you get podcasts. However, the very best place to find us is on our own website, HyperionAdventuresPodcast.com. And while you're there,
you can sign up for the newsletter.
Please sign up for the newsletter. We have lots of information going for you out there on our newsletter. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Twitter at Hyperion Podcast, Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest at Hyperion Adventures Podcast. We do have a YouTube channel. Hopefully you're watching some of these episodes on YouTube to see how lovely Michelle is, to see how goofy I am. My hair is still growing. It's full mullet stage
Looking
now.
good.
You want to find us on YouTube, just do a search for Hyperion Adventures Podcast. Hit subscribe and you'll know whenever we have a brand new video. And if you ever want to contact us for any reason, please hit us up on our Gmail account, HyperionAdventuresPodcast@gmail.com.
We love hearing from you. And if you have questions of anything that we've ever put out there or anything else, we really love to help you.
Definitely. If you have some questions on some of Michelle's research from this week, there was a lot of in-depth stuff, please hit us up and I'm sure she'll respond to you at the earliest convenience for her. So that's it. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Hyperion Adventures Podcast. We look forward to sharing some time with you again next week. Until that time, I'm Tom.
I'm Michelle.
And we hope that you have a magical week.
Bye.